Here we are. Can you believe it's actually happening? Halo Infinite has officially launched the single player campaign as of yesterday. I have to say that this game really feels to me like I wish Destiny did all those years ago when you saw all those trailers and all that hype, the hope of going out into these vast open worlds and exploring everything and just getting lost in the environment and in all of the optional side things you can get into. This feels like the biggest progression in a first person shooter game that I could think of in a really long time. And I say the Destiny thing specifically because I remember so fondly getting a PlayStation 4 and watching the trailers and getting hyped up in what the promise of what Destiny would be. And while it was incredibly fun, ultimately feeling underwhelmed really until the Taken King came out. That's when I really started to say, yes, this is what I wanted. Fun things to do and get lost in this great open environment. Halo does not pull any punches from this right out of the bat. And for all of the horrendous press that Halo has been getting, largely from me as well, and a lot of us regarding progression in the battle pass system and very significant cuts in what we would consider core Halo content and overarching and very aggressive, honestly, campaign in terms of microtransactions and how much the skins and all the DLCs and little cosmetic things cost. I have to say, when you fire up Halo Infinite's campaign, you forget about all of that. And that to me is the absolute greatest thing I can say about this. It's that 343 has absolutely nailed this type of universe. And I think a lot of goodwill will come to them because of this. Obviously, this doesn't remedy or replace or any of the it doesn't take away from any of the nonsense that we've had to go through, and we will probably continue to go through for some time as we progress our multiplayer campaign. But a lot of goodwill was definitely done today. And I'm really, really grateful that this game came out. So before I even get into my kind of initial impressions, first look on this, I just want to say that it definitely softens a lot of the blows, for sure, at least for me. And maybe other people feel that way too. I think Halo going to an open world design really mixes up the narrative quite a bit. This is coming from a previous Call of Duty player who went through the single player campaign in Call of Duty, who played an excessive amount of the multiplayer, even with Battlefield, which I understand is a competitive multiplayer as well. I really like how Halo, and really by comparison, the single player portion of Halo, really rewards you for thinking outside the box. Far too often in these games, we have what we call the meta. And the meta is the hot configuration. Use this gun with this scope because it is the best. In this map, stand in this spot and do this thing because you will get the most kills, whatever. I feel like Halo really mixes up that narrative. And I hope that it isn't lost in all of this, that this open world really does feel like an awesome playground. This particular area that you're looking at, the gameplay footage here, is from one of the very first missions in the game, the tower, in which you have to infiltrate this tower to uncover its secrets and fight the big bad, whatever. Pretty standard fare, right? However, there are so many different things and ways to progress through here. You could do the approach that I did, where you kind of have a battle rifle and you're taking enemies out from afar across these perches. You could switch to what I'm doing now, getting up close and personal with the assault rifle. There are tons of weapon racks and grenades and objects that you can throw, these like explosive types of crates littered everywhere. And you are rewarded for exploring, not only by finding little tchotchkes and lures and little lore nuggets and that sort of thing, But you'll find different weapons. There's mounted machine guns that you can pick up. There are turrets that you can utilize. There are rocket launchers to be found. That really does make you feel like, hey, I kind of went outside of the traditional path. I checked every little nook and cranny, and I found some really cool stuff. I like that. I think that's a very fun way of kind of progressing through this universe. So I think the open world aspect of the game, despite whether you like the plot or the character developments or any of the other tangential things that are occurring in the universe, the core gameplay loop here, the core open world, is awesome and really ripe for exploration in a very satisfying way that does really pay off. So I'm really happy that Halo has kind of grown up past the linear, corridor shooter type mechanics, which were still a ton of fun and are still a ton of fun. I still play Master Chief Collection. I wouldn't say daily anymore, but I will still be playing quite a bit of it, and I do enjoy the old design of those levels. However, being in this open, lush environment in which you can freely walk around and see and do all these wonderful things around you, it's really, really cool. So I'm going to move off of the open world stuff, and I want to kind of break down in more of a traditional review some of the kind of big points that I think are worth talking about. And the first is definitely the graphics. Halo has worked, 343 I should say, has worked really hard on what they call this new engine, this Slipstream engine, and I'm not going to bore you with all the technical facts, but needless to say, it was a radical overhaul of how the game came together from a graphical perspective. Lighting and assets and shadows and stuff. And I think most people immediately will just be impressed by the smooth frame rate, which on consoles runs phenomenally well. I'm playing this on an Xbox Series X. I'm having an absolute blast. It's a rock solid 60 frames a second. It does not falter even a little bit. A lot of that has to do with the way the graphics are being processed in the background with DLSS and all that other stuff. I'm not going to bore you with that, but I'll just say that the trade-offs that they have made from a technical perspective versus a performance perspective, I think are really well done. You're not going to notice a lot of pop-in. You're not going to notice a lot of weird artifacts. Yes, it's there if you look really hard, but the moment-to-moment, what's on the tip of your nose action is going to look great. Yes, they do not have ray tracing available at this time. I think that's a big oversight. I think that should be an option should people want it. It will most likely lower the frame rate from 60 to 30. But as with most conventional games now, you typically have the performance mode versus the quality mode. And as a result, you should be able to elect to have all the eye candy at a cost of a frame rate. For me, the way that Halo plays, as fast, as fluid as it is, I definitely will always stick to the 60 frame per second experience. If that means I don't get all the eye candy and everything that goes with it, for me personally, that's fine. I don't yet own a 120 hertz display. God, I wish I did. But this game does also support a super, performance mode of 120 FPS, which I can sort of emulate on my computer. We'll talk about that in a moment. But needless to say, it looks great. The attention to detail in the world is much appreciated, and despite some of the technical limitations of the engine, when you are out in the open world driving around with a mongoose or warthog or whatever, the world feels vibrant and alive. Being able to see lots of environment for incredibly long distances, to see enemies way out in the horizon, and then to be able to walk over and engage with them is something that was sorely missing from other Halo games, particularly because of its corridor shooting nature. But now having the ability to walk out freely in the world and see everything around you at distance and to be really impressed by the granularity of the design is great. On the computer side, unfortunately, it's a slightly different situation. The computer port is not optimized very well at all. I'm running a high-end PC, and I have had to make significant changes on my expectations to be able to get a solid frame rate. This game does support ultra-wide natively, which is awesome. you're going to be able to experience the world in ultra-wide settings, which look even more amazing than they do now. And that's awesome as well. But the way that they have implemented a lot of the PC graphics, the lack of a true full screen mode, for example, the fact that it has to run in a bordered Windows mode is baffling. A lot of the options that are available don't seem to make significant trade-offs in frame rate versus performance. And I could nerd out for hours on this, and people much smarter than me, particularly Alex over at Digital Foundry, has done so. He's got a phenomenal guide that walks you through what he considers optimal settings to get the most out of your graphics card. But it's a little unfortunate that the game that came out it needed a little more refinement, I think. Thankfully, all of the nonsense that we saw in the launch trailer years and years ago during their initial tease, this is right before they decided to delay the game, has gone away. So you're not going to see the crazy artifacting and ugly pop-ins. The texture quality on the enemies is, Craig is gone. I mean, I'm sure he's an Easter egg in there somewhere, but it looks a lot prettier. So they have absolutely nailed the visual part of this package, and as a fan, I am so grateful, and I couldn't be more excited. The sound design is a different story. Not to say I don't love it, because I do. I typically game upstairs. If you guys know, I use a Shit Hell 2 with a pair of Sennheiser HD 650s. High-end stuff. And it sounds phenomenal. The report on weapons, the echo of, depending on where you're shooting, the explosions are loud and vibrant, they hit hard. The thing that I'm a little confused about, though, is if you recall, and I've done a blog on this, so if you're curious, go check out my Halo playlists. You can see a lot of discussions on the technical design of this game. But 343 was very adamant about this new sound engine that they had built. And the sound engine, among other things, was supposed to force players to hone in on targets faster by prioritizing audio of what the game felt was more important than not. What this ultimately seemed like it would do on paper is lower some of the overall ambience in exchange for more in-your-face action that would allow you to quickly focus on targets. They talk a lot about how directional audio worked and what targets were shooting at you versus which ones are in the periphery. I've got to say, in playing the multiplayer portion of this game for now a month and the campaign for about 7 or so hours, I know it released yesterday, I'm an addict, I've got to say I don't notice any of that. I don't notice any of that really defined sound. It sounds very normal to me. So whether it was not implemented or scrapped or somehow modified, I can't say. I don't think it takes away from the experience not having it. I can say that when I am walking around in the open world, the gunfire I hear from myself and from enemies, the banter I hear from enemies as I walk up on certain camps, the way the music and the background music flares up at key moments in the mission really do play well into the experience. And I have to give them credit once again. The soundtrack in this game really hits hard. Since there are so many scripted scenes where unfortunately you do lose some control of your character, they've obviously nailed those perfectly. But even in the moments where you are walking around and you enter into a room with a lot of enemies, or in this case, I rode up the elevator into the tower proper to begin the final area of the stage, the music flares up at very specific points. They've done a really good job of nailing down those key moments in which you need to hear a little ditty or some sort of triumphant fanfare or something. And I think they've done it really well, better than other open world games I've played for sure. I just got done playing through the very exhaustive, in a good way, Fallout 76, or I'm sorry, Fallout New Vegas, as well as Far Cry 6 if you want something way more modern. They don't do a good job there of mapping background music to what you're doing. Halo's figured it out, and for as much as this remains an open world game, they have absolutely nailed down some of those key corridor-esque moments to really amplify the sound design, and I'm as an audiophile, I am really grateful that they did that. So good job again on the sound design. With some of the other portions of the game, particularly with the collectibles and the ancillary things you'll be doing, I'm glad that they decided to include that in kind of the core gameplay. Now, this is a shooter first and foremost, okay? That's obvious. This is a first-person shooter. It doesn't pretend to be anything that it's not. But they do sprinkle in a significant amount of optional things to do, whether they be to rescue Spartans who've been, or not Spartans, rescue Marines who've been kidnapped, or to go find these lore data recorders to kind of piece together the story. That really, more than anything else, I feel is really beneficial to the world building of this game. And it does provide you a meaningful way of going around and exploring the world. Far too often in these games, you get these collectibles that don't really amount to much of anything, but I feel like everything that's been put in this game, similar to the combat where I mentioned you may find random weapons lying around, I feel that the collectibles and the lore in this universe really does serve a greater purpose, and I'm very happy for that. Halo has long had a problem of dropping you into a game with the expanded universe not fully fleshed out. And what happens is if you're playing Halo 1 and then you jump directly into 2, 3, 4, or 5, ODST, Reach, whatever, there's a lot of stuff that's happening in the background that you don't see because it's part of what they call the transmedia universe, where you have books and comic books and podcasts and short films to amplify different characters who are inserted into the game. Most notably, if you played Halo 4 and jumped into Halo 5 Guardians, you noticed that mysteriously Catherine Halsey, the doctor who is responsible for the entire origination of the Spartan program, was missing her arm. And it wasn't explained like, hey, why is your arm missing? Well, you'd have to go back and read the book to understand why is her arm missing and what happened. And that's just one of many examples. When we left off Halo 5 Guardians, what a mess of a story that was. But recall that Cortana had gone kind of nutso and had taken over the world, essentially, and that things weren't looking good for the UNSC. We drop into Halo Infinite, and now we're fighting against the Banished, a group that if you are familiar with Halo Wars and Halo Wars 2, you know who they are very well. But Cortana is seemingly gone. The Guardian crisis is seemingly over. What happened and why? Thankfully, a lot of the ancillary lore that was put into this game does answer that question, and I'm grateful for that. So I'm glad that they were able to fill in the gaps and kind of figure out what happened and why. And I think that almost, I don't want to say it's a requirement, but I feel like if you want to get the most out of this game, you absolutely do want to go through and explore every nook and cranny because it will help you enjoy the story better. Now, if you don't care about anything in the story and you just want to run around and blow stuff up, well, hey, more power to you. The collectibles are great for you as well to give you more Spartan cores, which allow you to upgrade your character, which do make a very big difference in combat, increasing your shield or the reduction of your grapple shot, for example. All really wonderful things. So that's what I mean about the exploration. You're going to go off in these little corners of the world and you're going to find either cooler weapons or you're going to find upgrades that make you feel like more of a badass. And that is awesome. And I'm really glad that they were able to kind of marry those two systems together. I'm really picking on Far Cry here, but I recall all the times I'd find these chests that were littered everywhere. You'd open up a treasure chest and the loot inside contained an emblem for your car or some sort of nonsensical little tchotchke that just was like a data folder on something that was irrelevant. Here, everything has been very meticulously really brought down to its core component, and I think that makes it a lot better. So I'm very happy for that. In conclusion, I haven't finished the game yet. Obviously, I'm still working through it. I don't plan to rush through it. I mean, I'll beat it when I beat it. I'll definitely go back and play it again on Lasso, as I do with every other Halo game at some point, because I want to, feel the true experience. By the way, Lasso is Lone Wolf, all skulls on, basically where you basically make it almost impossible to play. But I'm a nut and I want to do these things because that's just, I feel like I have to. So I'll do that at some point. But I'm not rushing through it. I'm enjoying my time with it, exploring and seeing the world and seeing the story of kind of what happened and what is going to happen. And I think it's in a very good place. I'll close out by saying that, you know, this game definitely is a bright spot on the end of the year. I think we've had some very rough releases. I mean, Halo, as I said, the multiplayer aspect definitely is a little rough. Call of Duty Vanguard is not really receiving the love that it should. And honestly, maybe rightfully so, I don't think it's a very good game. Battlefield 2042 is an unfortunate technical mess right now. So it's nice to actually all collectively kumbaya together and to say, yes, we all like Halo, and yes, we're all playing the single player. I look at my friends list on Xbox Live. I currently have 7 of you guys right now playing this game actively, and it warms my heart because I know when I talk to each of you individually, you're going to tell me how fun this game is, and you're going to tell me all the cool adventures that you had, and you're going to share your screenshots of the things you saw, and oh, did you go find this treasure over here, or where's the skull, or whatever. I like that. And I think that is a good way to end out 2021. And I think that's a good way to at least cap off a little bit of what's been going on with Halo Infinite. Despite all the turmoil and all the nonsense, it looks like 343 has, when it mattered the most, put it all together and given us a phenomenal package. So very grateful for that. And look forward to hearing your comments below on your thoughts of the campaign so far. Thank you guys so much for watching. Get out there and play some Halo because it's awesome. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.